I made a short a few days ago about Zur the Enchanter and combat tricks. I think it needs its own longer video though, so that's what you're watching now. In that short, I talked about how I dislike Zur's top decks on EDH Rec being Enchantress based. While it's not super weak, it's a little too copy-paste for me. I like to have decks that no one has built or no one thinks of. I also love combat tricks. Tricks are essentially cheap, boring instants that buff your creatures just enough to win you the battle. For example, if you've got a 3/3 and your opponent has a 5/5 and they block with that 5/5, playing a card like Giant Growth lets your creature survive and kill the other. You can also give First Strike or Indestructible to a creature with Death Touch, give your creatures protection from the other creature so yours can't be damaged, etc. So your opponents don't want to block anymore. This means that cards that do something whenever they deal combat damage to an opponent add another layer of difficulty to your opponent's choice of whether to block or not. This also adds the beauty of the bluff to games, which makes any game more interesting in my opinion. Imagine you attack with Sergeant John Benton, 3 cards in your hand and 2 mana. Pretending that your hand is decent and that you're not getting flooded is essential to you getting off your feet. If you want a more in-depth video on a game plan example, go watch Salubrious Snail's video and subscribe while you're at it. Ever since I saw his video, I've pretty much been obsessed with tricks. They can pretty much go with any commander and they ruin friendships particularly well. The main commander Salubrious Snail talked about was his friend Xyrus the Writhing Storm deck. It says when this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, you and that player each draw that many cards, so 3 by default, and anytime an opponent draws a card, except their regular draw, you create a 1/1. The deck's general goal is to ramp and play a couple valuable creatures until you get Xyrus out, then hit whoever's falling behind to help them. This also creates a few snakies. Then using your massive card advantage, Voltron the heck out of Xyrus with tricks, giving you even more card advantage and ending a couple enemies in the process. I've noticed, at least with my chosen commanders, that like many archetypes, there's some requirements to get it to work. One is that you need cards in hand. Even if your hand is just 7 lands, bluff. 2, you'll need mana. Ramping is obviously good for any deck, but I think it's more important in tricks decks than most. 3, you need at least 1 creature on the battlefield. Most commanders fulfill that requirement, but if you want your commander to be the main creature like the Xyrus deck, it should have a trigger from combat damage or some other spicy payoff. Another optional box to check is if it's got blue. I mainly run mid-range decks, so this might just be me, but if you're going to hold up mana to keep opponents from attacking you, you might as well hold up mana for counterspells, just in case they bring out an infinite combo, board wipe, or other extremely powerful cards. Oh, and while you're at it, you might as well consider a couple cards like Fog. These are pretty simple to set up too. Just playing a Rampant Growth turn 2 and a Cold Ice Selkie turn 3 sets you up pretty nicely. Also, as many of those requirements you can fit into the command zone, the better. In my Miss Bumbleflower deck, she draws 2 cards a turn when you cast her second spell. She's got Vigilance, meaning she can be an attacking and blocking creature, and she turns any spells into combat tricks. She's also got blue for counterspells. So back to Zur the Enchanter. By himself, he's a creature, he's blue, but most importantly, he can search for a 3-cost enchantment each time he attacks. The main reason I thought of Zur when I was trying to find a new tricks commander is as foretold. This card is awesome for combat tricks because you don't even have to have untapped mana to strike fear in your enemy's eyes. I'd say this counts as ramp along with Naiad of Hidden Coves. Finally, card advantage. Most people obviously use the busted Necropotence and Rhystic Study. If you're going for a more budget-friendly deck though, Wavebreak, Hippocamp, or Phyrexian Arena work good enough for a little more than 90th of the price. You don't have to have any of these boxes ticked in the command zone, but in my experience it makes the deck a little bit more consistent. Combat tricks decks are extremely versatile. You can combine any archetype with tricks. For example, my Kaus deck is mainly about morphed creatures. The commander lets you draw a card when a newly flipped creature deals combat damage to an opponent. Between the unrevealed creatures I can turn face up at instant speed and combat tricks, there's plenty of room for bluffing, negotiations, and versatility, which is what makes a game fun in my opinion. Hopefully this video inspired you to make a combat tricks deck, or at least add a few tricks to an existing deck to try it out. I'll have Salubrious Snail's video first link in the description along with my Zur deck. Bye.